to another episode of. I'm used to using.
Let's try that again.
Think of bloopers. All right. Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of You Thought It.
We said it.
I'm May Denise.
Lisa Marie.
And I'm Zeta.
And today we're going to talk about finances. I think it's a very taboo topic, especially in the Spanish community, in the churches, and I think it's a very, very important topic. So we're going to start a little bit with the administration, and, I have a question for you guys. When was the last time your church gave an informe, also known as a annual report, kind of like an income summary, an expense summary of what's going on in the church? Come on, comment below and let us know.
It's a great question. Great question. Actually, the church that I go to currently, they give one every year.
Good for them.
And they only give it to members.
Haven't heard it.
They actually only give it to the members.
But everyone's invited to listen to
the meeting. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone's invited to the meeting, even if you're not a member. So what they say is the difference between a member and a non-member is that the members actually get to vote on certain church issues. And then the members get to vote, and the non-members don't get to vote. So, but you're still welcome to listen and to hear and to participate. You just don't get to vote. So I think that's pretty cool because when I was younger, I think I remember the church that we grew up in. They had annual meetings, and they also had reporting, right, as well.
And the church was a concilio.
And it used to get heated too.
The church was a
It was under a
concilio.
council, yeah.
And they used to come with the concilio, if I'm not mistaken. The concilio used to be in the meeting.
So there was, I think there was each year the concilio had a meeting, right? And then the church also had their own private thing for the church itself.
But that was
Every
to
year there was a
vote.
concilio
But
thing.
that was to vote on the leadership. But I think the actual finance meeting, they used to be there. That used to be like on a Saturday.
No, that was the conventions, right?
The
So that was an
convention.
annual thing with all the churches, where all the churches had to
yeah.
report to other churches.
Yeah.
But the actual personal, private matters of the church, that gets done also yearly to vote,
Yeah.
like on members, on leaders, and you give your little informe there too as well.
And I know that your church specifically also votes on the projects that they're going to spend money on that
I
year.
believe so. I still haven't attended one of their meetings, but
No, but they said it last Sunday.
okay, yeah.
So they actually vote on what they're going to do with the money. So not only your church, but a lot of churches do. They actually vote on what their plans are for the year. So the idea of the income summary and the financial annual report is let's talk about how much money we've made, where the money came from, how much money we've spent, where the spending is. They're supposed to explain where the spending went. And this is how much money we have. And these are our plans on what we want to spend the money. And you get to vote on whether or not you're in agreement with spending that much money or, on what the church plans to do.
What? They do that?
You wouldn't know, right?
What? That's a
You mean
thing?
that they're supposed to work at the mission that they're supposed to have as a nonprofit organization? They're supposed
You
to.
said it nicely.
Thank you. I try.
So the churches, so a church is considered a charitable organization, and they file for what's to not pay taxes, right? The government, the IRS, and the federal government gives them something called a tax exemption. And they file for what's called a 501(c).
3C.
And that means that the church doesn't have to pay federal income taxes. And most of the time, it also means that they don't have to pay state taxes either, right? Depending on the state that they're in.
And what that also means for you as the taxpayer, as the member,
Yes.
is that when you contribute or donate to these churches, you can also write that off on your taxes. When you donate to a nonprofit organization, that means that if you, throughout the year, you gave tithes of $5,000 or $10,000, and you, as a taxpayer, you itemize your deduction, that can reduce your taxable income at the end of the year.
You know that there's pastors that say that you're not allowed to do that because that's stealing from God.
But then they're allowed to claim the tax exemption. I'm confused.
I was
So
just asking.
But I think it's like a circle, and it all goes around, right? Because if you donate to the church and you claim that on your income taxes, I gave money to the church, what happens is that then the government, right, doesn't tax you on that much income, and then they give you a bigger refund. And from your bigger refund, you go, and most people go
Tied
and they
from
give
that.
They
10%
tied from their
of their
refunds,
$10,000 refund check that they got because they wrote off the contributions that they made to the church. Now they got a $10,000 check, and now they can go ahead and give some more money back to the church. So I think it's a circle. It's a circle that,
everybody can benefit from it.
the gift that keeps
Yeah.
on giving.
So as a church, when there's rules, if you do apply to become a 501(c) and you don't want to pay taxes, well, it's not that easy. You have rules to follow. And so some of those rules are, for example, that you can't support a political party. And not a lot of people know that, right? If you're a 501c, you can't, go and endorse Trump or the next, 2024 president. You're not
Not as a
allowed
church.
to. Not as a church. You can
And you
individually, but
can't
not
preach
under the
that
church.
from your church either.
Yeah. You can't tell people who to vote for.
You
and
can't go to
have,
political campaigns.
Yes. You're not supposed to do that as a church. So, but most importantly, as a church, the idea is that you have a mission and you have a non-for-profit mission. And that mission is, whether it's to save souls, our mission as Christians, right, is to go and preach el evangelio all over the world, right? So it's to bring the gospel of salvation to everyone in any place that we can actually
for
reach.
the benefit of the community.
The benefit of the community and for the benefit of the souls, right? Spiritually speaking, yeah. So that's our mission, right? And they're going to do that to different things. Now, other churches have specific missions. They have mission statements, right? Some churches focus on people that are homeless, or missions going to other countries, or they focus on drug addicts, children that are abused,
domestic women.
Yeah. So they're going to have their niche, and normally they're going to use some of that money to donate or to help reach
give back that community,
that mission, right? And so again, it's a non-for-profit. So all the money that comes into the church, in order for you not to be taxed on it, has to be used for charity. It cannot be used for personal use. So I can't go buy a yacht under my name. I can't go buy,
non-profit means not for my personal profit, right? It's not a personal, it's not a, it differs from a business in the sense that when you have a business, your purpose of your business is to make money and make you money, right? Make you profitable. A non-profit means that whoever's running that non-profit is not supposed to be profiting from that non-profit.
Exactly. So it has to be for the benefit of not any person individually. Now, are there people that profit from the church? Yes. Is that correct? No. Can they get into criminal trouble? Yes. So legally speaking, and we're not talking about getting paid, right? We're talking about people who embezzle funds from a church or from a nonprofit. You can get in trouble for those things. But it's not the church's fault. So it's the actual person, right? And in every company, you're going to have something like that.
But before you go into that, explain how, even though it's a nonprofit, people who work at the church full-time are entitled.
I was going to go there. Yeah. So that's why I was saying that it wasn't, and you can talk about it too. It's not just, it's not the same thing as receiving income from the church. There's a difference when you're embezzling money that you're not paying taxes on, right? So it's called embezzlement when you're stealing and you're not paying taxes on it. You have to use it for the benefit of the church because you're getting a tax right,
an exemption,
a tax exemption. Thank you. Yeah. But now the people that work there, such as a pastor, should get paid. And should receive a salary, and it's also biblical.
Not just the pastors, right? And your other workers as well.
And exactly,
work in the churches full time.
Yeah. So who do you think should get?
I think that if you're a minister in the church and you're putting in hours and you're working full time, realistically, not every church has the financial means to pay every single member, and it's not realistic to pay everybody, right? You don't go to church to get paid, right? There's people that should be volunteering their time out of love, out of the love for God, but there are people who are in ministry full time,
right?
And the operation of a church is a lot like a business. A lot of people don't want to accept that and they don't want to hear that, but it is, right? If you're paying rent for a building, you have to pay operational costs, operational expenses. You have to pay, a lot of people choose not to work a secular job because they give their time, their full time. A lot of churches are open 4 or 5 days a week, and outside of the church, they also have to minister to people, on their own time. It takes time to prepare a sermon. It takes time to prepare events. It takes time to do all these things. So, I think that the people that are giving a lot of time to the church in terms of the operation, I think that if you as a church have the financial means to pay them, you should be paying them, right? And that's a taboo. It's a taboo because a lot of people are like, I don't need to get paid, but non-profit means it's not for your profit, and you should be taking care of the first people that a church should be taking care of, and that's another topic, is their members, is their people, is the ones that are giving their time and their dedication.
Investing.
And, you got to invest in your members because you know what? You're getting all this money coming in. Your workers are going hungry at home. Your workers are struggling. Your workers don't have the financial means to pay rent. They don't have the financial means, and that shouldn't be like that.
Exactly.
The first people that should be taken care of in a church is the people who are maintaining that church.
Absolutely.
Mic drop.
So I think that you have people that give so much time to the church, right? Yes, the pastor's there and he oversees the shepherds, but los levitas go unnoticed a lot of times. They have to be at every service. They have to be at every service to play musicians. Some church have, are blessed that they have a lot of musicians, and some of them don't. But musicians have to be there, and they get overlooked, almost like we're doing you a favor by letting you play in my church. And if you want to play here, you follow all these rules, but they never get a thank you. They never get, I'm not going to say never. There are churches that pay their musicians, right? And so, but it's things like this that help the members and the people working in your church continue to want to work in the church. Now,
That's why you see a lot of them leave the church to go play in secular events. They go and they use their talents elsewhere because appreciation should be for everyone. You should appreciate your musicians.
I think it goes a long way when you tell them that you value them and you thank them for the work that they're doing, just like you want to be thanked
And
as
it
a
comes
leader.
back to you. What you sow into your congregation, you're gonna reap it.
Mm-hmm.
If your members are blessed, they're gonna bless you right back.
Yep.
You know what it is for a person who, you know, gives you 20, 30, 40, 30 hours a week, 20 hours a week, because some of these churches are open Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and there's 4 hours of service. You know what I'm saying? 15, that's a part-time job. Away
Right.
from your family, away from your kids. Yes, you do it for the Lord, amen, and God does bless you to a certain extent, but the church is also accountable for blessing their members, right? You can't expect God to just drop $20 bills out of heaven. He can, but he's not really doing, that's your responsibility as a church to
It's
take
to
care
give
of your
also.
members.
And it's according to the budget, right?
And they
So we're
give
not
back.
telling you that you have to pay them an annual salary, but you can give them
I love offering.
a love offering every so often. Maybe you do it once a year, twice a year, but it shouldn't only be the pastor that really gets sewed into, right? When you have when you need so many people to actually run a church.
I agree.
Now, I understand if the pastor is doing it all. If he's the pastor, the cleaner,
Musician,
the musician, the singer.
I've seen it. I'm just saying.
What?
I've seen it.
I've seen it. Yeah,
happens.
yeah. Then obviously, you know, but it's
Then-
according to
then
the
you
budget.
pay yourself, Pastor. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
You're in that.
Yeah. And I feel like churches will probably, the smaller churches, right? The ones that are struggling would go so much further if they learn how to appreciate the members and the people that you have giving into your congregation. It would go a long way, right?
I think, like I said, it's a circle that keeps going around. So if as a church you're getting money coming in and you're feeding that back to your congregation, and the first people you're taking care of is your members, you pay them $100 a week or $50 a week or whatever the case is, they're gonna take tithes out of that. And they're going to give it back to you. They're going to take offering and they're going to give it back to you. And they're probably going to do it with more joy because they feel welcome. They feel appreciated. They feel like they're being taken care of.
And it
you know?
doesn't even have to always be money. Like maybe I gave my tithes and I'm short this month and I'm hungry. Like a grocery. Like, you know, like it's just thoughtful little things, you know, like, oh, I noticed that so and so, I don't know, their shoes is a little bit worn now. Let me bless them with a pair of shoes. You know what I'm saying? Like the thoughtfulness behind it, even more than the financial, right? I mean, everyone always needs money, but the thought behind it, like I thought about you,
Right.
and this is how I want to help you with. That
Right.
also
Goes a
speaks
long way.
volumes.
Right, right. So the church as a 5013C is required to do an annual summary. It's an annual report. And it's basically like we were saying that it tells the members, well, I don't think we actually explained what it was, right? So it's something that the church is required to do. Like churches have to sit here and create a financial statement of everything that has come into the church. So all the income. A lot of churches don't know this, so they don't do this, right? And I think we want to be a little informative. So for you, pastor, who is starting a church or who's been in church and, you know, obviously is getting the benefit of the tax exemption, then you're required to do these things. And then for you, member, who's in a church and who doesn't know what's going on with the finances of the church, these are, you know, your rights, and this is what your church should be doing. So it's more of an education for both parties. On the annual summary that they're going to do, they're supposed to make it simple. That's first and foremost. It should be something that anybody can understand. It shouldn't be very complicated. Some people will never understand finance. We're not talking to you. We're talking about to those people who it should be simple, you know, simple finance. They shouldn't make it very difficult. You get finance. You just did a math equation earlier.
Amen.
And so, the data said she couldn't do. So it's things that, you know, what the income is. So income from a church is going to be tithings. It's going to be love offerings. It's going to be donations. Some people contribute stocks to a church. They contribute bonds, you know. Property, right? These are things that are, well, that's going to go under the assets. But the income that actually comes in, money that they received, interest that they're getting from these dividends and things like that. So that's going to go into the income portion, right? The expenses are going to be the operating costs of the church. So that's, you know, the rent that they paid, the mortgage that they paid.
The church van.
Yeah, the church van, car insurance, things like that, insurance for the church. And then they're going to have the expenses of how much, you know, you pay the staff. And that particular number should go according to how much the church makes, right? It should be a reasonable number. It should be something that, you know, obviously I feel that the larger the budget, the more the pastor should get paid, the more work that they have to do. Or if God is blessing the church, then he should be blessing the pastor, right? Yeah. So I think it should go in accordance to how much the church is making. But on that report, you'll know how much the pastor's earning, anybody else in the church is getting paid, how much they make. any, if they had to do any renovations or any handiwork in the church, anything that they had to fix should be on there. It should be they have to do an expense report, and it should be a very detailed report of to what the church spent money on. And an explanation why. It's not just I spent this because I felt like it.
10,000
It's what we spent it on. Why did we spend $2,000 a month on this? I mean, should we have, right? Where did it go and why? It's an explanation to it. Don't ever feel bad for asking where that money is being spent and why. This is why Zeta said that in the convention. She remembered that it used to get spicy because people used to fight about these things. It did. I remember. You know what your church? I don't know if I can say it. What your church said on Sunday. Well, everybody's welcomed. Everybody's welcomed. Ain't nobody throwing chairs. We're not killing each other like in the old days. Because it was a very,
I remember when I was younger, when I was growing up, it was in the church that we grew up in that it was a spite. People used to be screaming, and I remember, I think it was the co-pastor at the time. He used to scream at people and tell them like, "Shut up and sit down. You're out of order." Yeah. And because there's, they have these parliamentary, right, parliament rules or something like that, where there's like, Sir President, can I speak? Or Sir President, can I ask a question? And you have to follow these rules. Yes, you may know, you may not. And if you don't say Sir President, it's like you're out of order, right? So there was these very strict rules that they had to go by. And I was a little girl, so I didn't really understand but I remember it used to get heated, right? I remember seeing people screaming at each other, "You're a liar, you're a thief," and it happens inside the churches. And one of the reasons why we're bringing this today is because money is it's a taboo, right? It's a taboo. A lot of marriages fail because of money.
Yes.
A lot of family members kill each other because of money.
Yes.
A lot of friends, they stop being friends because of money. And it's like,
and a lot of people are in jail because of money.
Right, exactly. And the Bible says that, the love of money is the root of all evil. But money in itself is not evil, right?
Exactly.
It's how you handle your money.
Yes.
And it's what you do with your money that will determine whether or not you're a good steward, right? Whether you can handle more responsibility. Because the Bible says that if in the little you were faithful, in the big you will be faithful. And God will bless you with more. And a lot of times you see these churches that they stay small and they don't ever grow. But it's because they haven't learned how to financially manage that money. And I'm watching this show on Netflix now, and it's called How to Live Your Rich Life, and I love it.
I watched it already.
And the reason I love it is because this guy, what he's
I'm
doing...
not there yet.
I agree with most of what he says.
What he's doing is that he's trying to deal with people in different tax brackets. And he's trying to tell them that it doesn't matter what tax bracket you're in, you can live your rich life, right? Right? Your perfect life. Maybe you're never going to be a multimillionaire, but where are you going to be comfortable? And with the little bit that you have, if you learn how to manage it well, you can make that work for you. And I think that, as Christians, one of my pet peeves, and I went to a church one time, and there was a woman on the altar, and she was saying, people have the audacity to ask about the finances. God didn't put you as a leader. All that's telling me is that you got something to hide. Because
you see my mouth, I'm like, you heard that?
Yeah, and she's trying to make it seem like if somebody asks for a record of where the money's being spent, like if you're a child of the devil and you don't have the right to ask those questions, like you don't trust the pastors. But you as a leader, if you have nothing to hide, then you don't have any reason to be upset about somebody asking you those questions, because the money is not yours. It's not for your... Remember when you signed up for this 501(c)(3) organization, you agreed that this was not for your profit.
If not, keep it private and pay your
taxes.
And
there are churches who refuse to sign up for this 501(c)(3) because they just don't want the government meddling in how they run their and that's okay too, right?
Yeah,
that's okay too.
But the church should know that. They should know that that's how you're choosing to run your because a lot of people are under the impression that they're doing a charitable contribution. But if you're not a charity, then I'm not doing a charitable contribution.
Right. And that's okay. If you want to give money to a church that's not a 501(c)(3), that's fine. Me personally, I've always said, I don't know if I was to ever have a church, if I would join a 501(c)(3). I would really need to examine that carefully, because I feel like it has its benefits in terms of money, right? But it also has its
constraints,
right? Because you're kind of limited into what you can talk about, not talk about, what you can do. Like. And it's like, I feel like if God tells me to speak on something, I need to speak on it. And I can't have nobody trying to put a foot on my neck telling me what I can and can't talk about just because I have a label on me. Right?
Like political.
And that's a big one, right? Because as a church, we need to be involved in politics.
So the point of the financial statement for the church is to talk about transparency. That's why it's there. it's transparency. So if you're in a church
Yeah.
where they're telling you don't ask for the finances, or it's a secret, or if you do
That's a
ask
red
for it,
flag.
it's
It's
a
a
red
red flag.
It's like a really big red flag.
We need a red flag in here somewhere.
I'm like, where is it? It's like, yeah, it's not a little one. So if they don't want to get asked about it, is because they're doing something funny. Because when you're, so there's a benefit to it, and the benefit is that when the church sees what you're doing with the money, and if you don't have money, they're gonna be compelled to give because they feel like they're part of this mission, right? They feel like they voted on what we want to get done, and we need to make sure we have the money for it. So it's gonna help you with fundraising. Again, if you're really involved in the community and you're doing things that are back, that giving back to the community. Like Zeta said earlier, it has to do with the community. You can't be a church collecting all these donations and not doing anything. Let's talk about it. There's a lot of churches that have big bank accounts and they're not giving back to the community. And every time someone needs a love offering, vamos a recolectar una ofrenda para el mano, and then they'll give 200-300 bucks. The church will add to it sometimes to the ofrenda, but you should have a bucket for
A budget.
a budget. Yes, you have to have the budget to give back to the community. It's supposed to be part of your 501(c). It's the reason why they're giving you the exemption. So you should be working. It's not just for people to come to church and for me to feed these four walls. Obviously, we need to make sure that these four walls are fed first. We need to make sure that things are running correctly. And then after that, we need to make the budget to make sure that we're reaching outside of that so that our four walls can keep growing.
Yeah. What's your experience been?
I actually had a question.
Go ahead. We love it.
If a person in the church has a loss and they have to cover the cost of, let's say, a funeral, and they cannot afford it, is the church obligated to sow a seed or to cover the expenses? Or better yet, if a member of your church dies, as a church that they invested time into and their tithes and everything, as the church, obligated in any way to cover the funeral costs for their member?
I don't think they're obligated, but I think it speaks a lot about a church who doesn't take care of their members. Obviously, if everybody in the church has somebody die, it would be a hard thing to do if everybody's asking for a handout, right? I don't think that that's the purpose of a church in terms of finances. But that being said, especially if it's one of your leaders and one of your people that have been there with you from day one, I think that if you don't have it in the budget set aside for that, that you definitely should have the church come together and that's a good example of when to collect an offering, a love offering from the whole congregation so that you can bless this person's life in a time of need. There will be members that are going to come to you and say, hey, I need money for this. And now you also have members inside the churches that are bad stewards, right? And they expect the church to pay their rent and they expect the church to bail them out of all their debt. No, like you need to go take a finance class, go get
watch.
a side
You
job,
thought it we said it. Y váyase a aprender.
and learn how to manage your money, because the church is not there for that. The church is there to help the needy, not the irresponsible, right? We're here to educate the irresponsible. But at the same time, I feel like if your members are in need and they come to you and they tell you that you're in need, as a church, you have to find a way to help them. Whether that be, have them go to a finance class, help them get a side job.
A lot of churches
Show them.
have finance class, and it should be something that you teach your members. Some people know, but I think especially for the Hispanic community, you know how many people still think that the bank is robbing your money if you open a bank account?
They got that money in those mattresses.
I've heard some crazy things. I'm like, I won't say where I work, but I've heard some stuff, and I'm like, I wish you can get educated, and they just don't know. And for me, from my experience, I say this all the time, I wish I would have been born, or I would have been around the time, for my dad when he was in his accumulation age, as we call it, right, where he was earning,
No
and
401k.
I could have guided him in the right way, and they would have been in such a different position, but I wasn't. I'm here now to tell you. And so the church, there's something called life insurance, and I think that again, going back,
taboo also.
it's a taboo, but a lot of people don't have money to pay for unexpected deaths,
Funeral
right?
costs.
So I think that everybody knows you're gonna die at an old age, and what age you're gonna die, nobody knows. But we're two things are guaranteed: taxes and death, right? And so at some point we're gonna die, and the older you are, the more prepared people are for death. But for all these unexpected deaths that happen, a bunch of them happen during COVID, people get hit by a car, things like this happen, a lot of people are not prepared for. And that's what life insurance is for, right? And can you talk about that a little bit?
So life insurance is pretty much insurance for not your life. It's really
Yeah.
death insurance, right? Insurance for when you die.
Yeah.
And so if
And it'll pay for your funeral.
it'll pretty much pay for your funeral, and depending on the size of the life insurance, you could get a $10,000 policy, you could get a $20,000 policy, $100,000, $1,000,000, depending on what you can afford. But will not only pay for your funeral, it'll also leave some type of consolation money for those that stay left behind. And I think that if you can afford it, it's a good idea to invest into, especially if you have children, right? Young children, if you have a family that, maybe they don't have their assets in order, maybe they don't have, it's just a good thing to just leave behind. I think that if you pass away, you have that peace of mind knowing that they'll have something to fall back on.
So you know that some churches have a budget for widows and the ill and the sick?
I think that that's mandatory.
And even give an
That's
allowance
biblical.
to them.
Mm-hmm.
They give an allowance to widows and to the sick.
That's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. I think that that's what the church has been called to do, right?
So do you know what's supposed to happen to widows when they're a widow? Who's supposed to take care of them?
The church.
The kids first. If they have no one to take care of them, then the church takes care of them.
Right.
Yeah. But you, irresponsible son and daughter who doesn't take care of your mother or father and who's a widow, usually the mother, take care of your parents.
Responsable, arrepiéntete.
Yo estoy directa hoy.
Simmer down.
No, it's biblical, right?
Díselo, díselo.
It's biblical. You're supposed to take care of your parents if they don't have to. Some of them, thank God, are well off, but some of them need your help, and you turn a blind eye, and you're like, no, I don't.
I have my
Let's
own
bring it-
family.
Yeah.
Let's bring it deeper, right? The Bible says that the religion that is pure and without spot or blemish is to take care of the widows and the orphans.
Yep.
Right? The religion, I don't care what religion you're from, the religion that's pure and without blemish is the one that takes care of the widow and the orphan.
Amen. So take care of your family.
Let that
And
sink in.
then if they don't have anyone, then the church takes care of them. Right? So the church
Dito.
is pretty much obligated to do love offerings and to help out these widows who are short on cash. If you have it, you can't tell me that, the church is living a lavish lifestyle and that these widows are eating bread and water.
That's sad.
It is sad.
That's sad.
And obviously you can't do it all, but you should have, some type of love offering for them.
and you should educate your people in your community and your church and just sow that into them, that awareness and that responsibility into them, where it's like you have to take care of your own, and that's what I love about a lot of some religious communities, some societies, right? That they take care of their own. They take care of their own first. And that's something that we lack.
But I wish we would. If we were to pray for this and really put it forward, like if you know somebody in your church who has a small business, support them first. There are religions and communities out there that they'll pay a little more because they don't care how much their person is charging, but they're going to go to their person because they're not going to give business to anybody else. They're going to make sure that their person thrives.
And us
their
will be like,
community
no,
thrives.
there's a new business, but they're charging too much. I don't care. I could get it down the street from the devil worshiper.
I was going to say satanista que está ahí abajo.
Or from one that, preaches against the church or an enemy of the church. They rather go to them because it's half price than to support their own brother and sister because they're charging too much. And that's sad because it's like you don't sow into your own community. Like it's you got to be your people's number one supporters first,
So what do we think are some acceptable expenses for the church?
Rent.
No,
Light.
Yes. Go deeper than that.
I think aside from operating expenses, which you spoke about, obviously paying a salary to the people that work there,
That's a necessity.
a reasonable salary.
Yeah.
I think
What
that there's
determines what's reasonable?
I think it depends on the income of the church and the time and the effort and the resources that the person is putting into your.
So I want to say what I read, which was 45 to 55% of the budget for staff.
Okay.
And I think that's high, but it's the budget. It's not the income. So it depends on the budget. Obviously, you should have money left over to save for emergency for a church. Like you shouldn't be
should always
spending.
be saving should be what 10%.
It depends.
10-20%.
Yeah, but it also depends on the fluctuations of the income and things like that. I think that you would dig a little deeper. What you're saving for also. Like if you have a project in mind, you might save a little more this year than you did last year.
You should also still have in case of a rainy day, right? Emergency expenses 6 months, right?
I think that for a church, even a year is fine.
Yeah.
6 months, a year, but that should be minimum. The church should have something to fall back on because let's say for COVID, a lot of people didn't tithe, a lot of people
I
didn't
was gonna mention
anything,
COVID.
and a lot of churches closed. It
So
was so sad.
if your monthly expenses are $10,000 as a church, you should have at least $100,000 set aside for a rainy day, right?
Right.
And that sounds like,
And
oh
that
my
doesn't
god,
come overnight.
that's a lot. But realistically, you know, it doesn't come overnight. You do it little by little. But in a situation like COVID, you have a year worth of expenses that now you can cover and make sure that your church continues to run at least for a year, right? Until you figure it out. And then aside from aside from savings, aside from that, I feel like you should have recreational activities for your member. I always think that if you have leaders, you should invest in educational courses for your leaders, so like
love
public PD,
that.
public what is it? Like schools have that.
Professional development.
Professional development.
Yeah.
I think that if you have somebody that's taking care of the finances, if you have treasurers in the church, you should send them every year to take our IRS course or a
Who
refresher
can
course.
take care of the finances? What are the biblical requirements?
Biblical requirements.
They have to be a good steward.
You have to be a good steward. You can't
You
be a
have to be able-
drunkie. You can't be a thief.
Yeah.
You know, like
It applies to you as a leader, but also you have to be good with money. You can't. It's like to work for a bank. If I have a misdemeanor
But this is what I always
or
say.
a felony, like on finance, because you can have a misdemeanor with money, like money charges. I can't work for a bank if I have that, right?
But
It
it's
doesn't
what I-
matter if it's a misdemeanor or if I have any felony.
But it's what I always
But
say.
it's
If I have a
important.
back pain,
Even if you
I'm
have
not
back
gonna
credit.
go to an eye doctor,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so if I need somebody to handle my finances, I'm not gonna go to the one who specializes in English literature. Like I'm not. I'm gonna go to somebody that's good with numbers.
And I'm not saying that you should give a credit check to your person, but in the bank they do. In the bank,
And a
if you're
lot of
gonna
jobs.
if you're gonna apply for certain roles, they do check your credit. And if you have bad credit, they won't take you specifically to like licensing and things like that. They'll even fire you. Yeah,
If you have bad credit.
yeah, for bad
Ay,
credit.
Dios
Yeah,
mío.
yeah,
Así que arréglense.
yeah.
Yeah. I think recreational events, I think that
I like that.
the churches
What
should
kind of
have
recreation?
at
What
least
would
a
be
couple.
considered too much and too little? Like in the sense, what do you mean?
A couple times a year, you should have like barbecues, get-togethers.
Yeah, I was gonna say people do street fairs. They get book bags. They get notebooks. They give back to the kids for
love
back
that.
to school.
Yeah,
They do vacation Bible school. While some people do
love
pay,
that. Mhm.
I would think, I would hope that they in those like stuff like that, they're setting aside a budget for kids who probably can't afford it but really do want to join. So stuff like that.
I like that.
I think the church should invest in a lot of recreational activities for the kids to teach them
off the street.
to keep them
Yeah.
off the street and to teach them to love God.
Yeah.
To keep them busy, yeah. And some of it the parents can pay, but some of it, the parents
You
can't
can
pay.
allocate
And
funds
and
for
should
those
have
people.
funds for that, yeah. A children's ministry, the youth ministry, you should, and there's churches that want like the parents or like for you to fund your own ministry, and I think that the church is usually big enough to be able to help fund those ministries as well.
I think that if the ministry wants to collect additional funds, they should. But I agree. I think that the church should set aside a piece of their budget to fund these ministries.
I wanna call
I
it
used to be in a church where I had to fund my own services, and then the money that I got from the services
Let's give it to the church.
went to the church, not the ministry. But that was just me.
but
Maybe
I-
your church is different.
But that's what I was gonna say. A lot of churches, especially the smaller churches,
Churches.
we have a lot of churches being run by older people, right? That come from a different generation that don't have the knowledge, and they're small churches, right? So that they don't have a lot of people that have the knowledge. They don't have people that ask questions. They don't have people that just know better. And I think that when you know better, you do better.
And not only because they are the older generation, they take questions as a sign of disrespect or of defiance.
Defiance.
And I think that something that our generation has that is good and can be good is the ability to inquire without feeling disrespected. Like, and again,
like
your
that.
tone is not necessarily what you say; it's how you say it. Like being able to have those tough conversations. Whereas, like, I'm not being accusatory, but I do have questions I need answers. You know.
I love to ask questions. I'm very nosy. I'm nosy. I am, and like sometimes my sister will be like, "You asked that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. I did. I want to know."
I'm for asking questions.
No,
but,
I'm
read
really
between
direct.
the lines too.
I'm really direct. I'm like, "Hey, so how much you made?" I'll be like, "Oh, did you do this or did you do that? Where did you go?" Like, I want to know, right? And I learned that from Jesus, right? Jesus
Amen.
was very direct. He was very direct in his questions, and he would ask people questions, and people would get offended by those questions. But you know why? Because he would ask them questions that would confront them, that would make them look within, that would make them. And you know what? What happens when you ask the right questions? you get answers. Right? You get answers. You get confronted, and you're able to, because a lot of times all you need is a question to make you realize.